Welcome to a podcast for our new series, Inside the Investigation, where we go in depth on cases here in Eastern Iowa to see how police and prosecutors piece together evidence in a crime. I'm joined by Linn County Attorney Nick Maybanks. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And we're talking about the case of Kazius Childress. This was a big deal when this happened. First, we have the death of Cordell Lewis, found shot in the middle of a neighborhood in southeast Cedar Rapids. The very next morning, Kayvon Johnson's found shot in a park, same side of town. So Cedar Rapids police are investigating 2 homicides within 24 hours.
Yeah.
How unusual was this?
Incredibly unusual. So I've been with the county attorney's office for 25 years. I can't remember ever having a back-to-back murder that happens within hours, really. So it rocked our little community. Definitely we wanted some answers.
And so how did you guys go about, I guess, piecing together the evidence? In the early part of this crime, as witnesses weren't totally cooperating with police, and I know police were working to gather as much surveillance video as they could.
Yeah, so, thankfully, we at least had a crime scene to work with early. Mr. Lewis's body was in the middle of the street, so we knew that he had been shot. We knew that he had been shot from behind once, and he'd been shot in the cheek and also in the forearm. We had shell casings on the scene. That's always a good piece of evidence, so we knew that we could take those. We could examine those and see, whether maybe we could find the firearm involved in it. And of course, the witnesses in the neighborhood were able to direct us to the address of 309 31st Street Drive Southeast, so we knew where it all originated. Then it got into trying to talk to folks there who, like you said, weren't exactly forthcoming about what happened initially.
And so there's 2 different crime scenes happening. It doesn't take police long to realize that these 2 crimes are related, because the witnesses they are talking to are bringing up the same names from the same groups of people. How crucial was surveillance video in these cases?
So it ultimately was the piece of evidence that solved the crime. And we didn't have it initially. So we were trying to rely on witnesses on the scene who had said, hey, we know there was a tan Chevy Impala that was in the driveway of 309 31st Street Drive Southeast. And so we were able to finally, locate who was driving that through witnesses and the description of the vehicle. So eventually we were able to determine who was there, but there wasn't a consistent story among the witnesses. So it kind of led the case to start to get a little cold in terms of, can we actually figure out what happened there? Well, then the surveillance video led us to evidence where we were more certain of who did what.
Yeah, let's go ahead and show that here. All right, so in this video, we see Kazius more towards the street, Cordell standing further up the driveway. You can see them, they appear to be bickering, and Kazius pulls out a gun.
Yep.
And Cordell's running away. It looks like he's continuing to shoot at him. I mean, this is pretty black and white evidence here.
Yeah. Once we saw this video, we had already pretty well determined that Kazius Childress was our suspect just based on some witness descriptions. Although there was another individual there who we might talk about. I know we're going to talk about, Kayvon Johnson, who was also a suspect. But once we got this video, the homeowner, Mr. Barney, ultimately facilitated the return of this video getting to the police department. We knew, okay, Kazius Childress is definitely our suspect. It's clear as day that he shot Mr. Lewis and that it was not in self-defense.
Yeah, and Kazius continues to deny his involvement to investigators, even when they confront him during interviews and say, we have video.
Yeah.
He continues to say that he didn't do it. So how do you go about preparing for a trial, something like this, when he's saying he didn't do it, but you've got video?
Well, so we know he did it. His denials were simply, I think, a last gasp, maybe a Hail Mary. He hadn't seen the video, so maybe in his mind he's thinking, oh, they don't really have a video. They're just telling me that, trying to get me to confess. Well, when we had him arrested, the process of pretrial discovery takes place, and his attorneys get access to this video. Well, it was around that time that the defense, or his defense, evolved, as we say in our profession, and then he said, well, he was doing that in self-defense. So as far as preparing for trial, then we know that this video is going to be seen by a jury, and that the issue here is going to be, was Kazius Childress in any kind of reasonable fear for his life at the time he shot Cordell Lewis? And as the video shows, we're pretty confident we were going to be able to overcome that.
Yeah, because Kazius initially told investigators that it was Kayvon who killed Cordell, and then somebody killed Kayvon in retaliation for Kayvon killing Cordell. Obviously, they know that's not what really happened. So when you're preparing for trial in a case like this, what kind of obstacles do you run into?
So it's interesting in regards to Kazius Childress's statement to the police. He was accurate in terms of describing what the shooter did, as we saw in the video, but he just said the shooter was Kayvon Johnson. So he described his own actions, but then we found out that it was him that did it, not Kayvon Johnson. So we knew that he wasn't going to be able to argue that reasonably at trial. So then we need to investigate kind of the background of what led to this. Because if he's going to claim self-defense, then we have to be able to overcome that. So that's when matters like what took place inside 309 before this happened becomes important. And then the involvement of other people on the scene and what the witnesses would say, because we don't have video of that. Mm-hmm. So then we had to get ready and get prepared for that. And we found out there were multiple other people that were accountable for their actions in this case.
Yeah, and let's talk about that a little bit, because we know that obviously Pierre Abba is seen on the surveillance video. She's seen moving the murder weapon. Mm-hmm. And we also know Quinana Jones drove the getaway car. Neither of them are really cooperating with authorities. Pierre Abba is telling them repeated lies about what she says happened. And Quinana Jones doesn't want to talk to police at all. And so what kind of hiccups or what kind of impact does that have when direct witnesses like that aren't cooperating with police?
It's frustrating but expected. We obviously had surveillance video that showed Quinana Jones, who goes by the nickname Buki, mm-hmm. Driving Kazius Childress away from the scene. We had witnesses that described her coming back, stopping at Cordell Lewis's body while Kazius Childress took something believed to be a cell phone from him. We knew that Quinana Jones was directly involved, at least in the getaway portion of this. And Pierre Abba, like you said, she was on the video grabbing the gun that Kazius Childress had put in the mailbox attached to the front of the house and taking it inside the house. We also had a witness there, Clee Barney, who described that Pierre Abba explained to her that essentially that this was a robbery and it wasn't supposed to go down this way. Basically that Cordell Lewis wasn't going along with the game and fought back. So we knew at that point in time, look, with our witnesses, we've got enough really to charge these two, but I wanted to give them an opportunity to come clean, mm-hmm. because they also could be witnesses. I mean, they'll be held accountable for their part, but do you want to participate in the prosecution of the guy who pulled the trigger? And ultimately, they just were not, in my opinion, honest enough to be able to use as witnesses, so they were prosecuted too.
Mm-hmm. And that brings up a good point, because there were other people there also when Kayvon Johnson was killed, but they were not prosecuted. Can you kind of explain why that was?
Yes. Okay. So we go on to the next murder here, mm-hmm. That happened around the 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock a.m. hour on January 28th. Mm-hmm. So we were able to find out that there was a green Infiniti SUV that was transporting Kayvon Johnson and Kazius Childress to Cedar Valley Park that night. And we were able to get enough information from a surveillance video at the Come and Go that showed them all together in order to identify who the driver was, and that was found out to be Brittany Kaiser, or Brittany Dunn, aka mm-hmm. Brittany Dunn, who is Kazius Childress's basically stepmom. Mm-hmm. So we knew that she and Kazius and Kayvon were together. Kazius told us that there was another person that was there, his named Lamont Dickens, who would be Brittany's brother. Tried to blame it on him. Lamont Dickens was interviewed. He said he was at home. We confirmed through his cell phone records he was at home. He was never seen. So we knew who was involved in that. Brittany Dunn ultimately came clean with us and described what happened. So we knew that she was going to be a valuable witness in the case. And as far as her criminal culpability, we couldn't really show that she knew or planned part of this. She was just the driver. So we elected to use her as a witness as opposed to a suspect.
Yeah, so there are definitely benefits when it comes to actually working with law enforcement in a case like this for yourself, even if you do have some sort of involvement.
Let me express how important it is, to be honest, with law enforcement, mm-hmm. that could really save somebody from being on the other side of a table instead of working mm-hmm. with us. And it always works to their benefit, to be honest, in any respect with mm-hmm. law enforcement.
Yeah, absolutely. And so Kazius eventually pleads guilty. This is a part of a plea deal. So instead of first-degree murder for both these cases, it was second-degree murder. Now, when he pleads guilty, that lets him have a lesser sentence than what he would have had, because obviously first-degree murder is automatic life if you're found guilty of that. So at sentencing, he's seen wearing a spit hood. I've covered a lot of court. I hadn't personally seen this until this case.
Yeah.
How common is that, and what's the reason for wearing a spit hood?
So to talk about the plea itself, so he did plead guilty to second-degree murder in the middle of the trial. We thought that was a beneficial plea agreement to us because it was very likely that the jury could find him guilty of second-degree murder if they didn't find that this was premeditated, that it was kind of spur of the moment. So we feel like we didn't lose anything there. We also knew we could prosecute him for Kayvon Johnson's murder and still get a consecutive sentence on it. Ultimately, he pled guilty to that, and this is what happened at the sentencing. So a few weeks before the sentencing, I got wind from the Linn County Correctional Center who, the inmates at the jail can make phone calls, and oftentimes they overhear those phone calls, that Mr. Childress had told the subject on the other end of the phone that he wanted to basically make the national news or make some kind of program at his sentencing, and that he was going to, if he didn't get a concurrent sentence, he was going to either punch or spit on me.
Oh.
So I relayed that back to the commanders at the Linn County Correctional Center. I said, I think we ought to do something about this. And they decided on their own that this was the best thing to do, to put this spit hood on him so he couldn't spit on me, and then to have extra security there so he didn't come after me. Don't know if he actually would have done it, but we're not going to take any chances.
Yeah, absolutely. Is that something that you've done before in other cases?
Yeah, we've had inmates that have, for one reason or another, that's just sort of their proclivity, is to spit on people. So that's when the spit hood's used. We've had people that have been arrested for multiple spitting incidents, and Linn County Correctional Center deputies don't want to get spit on, so whenever they go into a cell, this hood gets put on him.
And he showed no remorse during his sentencing. Let's take a look at what his reaction walking out of the courtroom.
Oh, Kayvon, ordeal, all 7 years I'm getting high. Y'all can't piss on that grave. Free the guys. I'm gonna be a flicker on top of the grave.
Okay, so you're in the courtroom when that happens. What's your reaction when you see that happen?
I mean, it's various things. It's pathetic. It's desperate on his part. It's obviously extremely insulting to the family involved. I can't explain why he would do something like that. Maybe he thought he wanted to get the last word, but it really shows that throughout the course of this case, from the time that these murders were committed all the way through trial and sentencing, that he just had no remorse for what he did. And, he's going to have the rest of his life in prison to think about that. And maybe someday he will have remorse, maybe he won't, but he won't be on, he won't be in the streets of Cedar Rapids, that's for sure.
Yeah, so he's sentenced to 2 50-year sentences back to back. So a total of 100 years, has to serve at least 70 of it before he'd even be eligible for parole.
Absolutely, and that worked out exactly how we wanted it to. When he pled to that second-degree murder offense, immediately I advised the defense that in the Kayvon Johnson trial, I was going to introduce evidence of his guilty plea as motive for Kayvon Johnson's killing, his admission that Kayvon Johnson was a witness. Ultimately, they decided they didn't want to go to trial, so we went to sentencing. I was pretty confident the judge would run consecutive, and yes, so now he's got a 100-year sentence. The mandatory minimum would make him somewhere in the neighborhood of 90 years old when he would be eligible for parole, so that's effectively a life sentence.
So is there anything else that you want to add at this point when you take a look back at this very unusual case for Cedar Rapids?
This was a case that happened personally for me within a couple of weeks after being sworn in as the Linn County attorney after the election in 2022. So I took a personal interest in this to say, I'm going to follow this one all the way through. So from the initial events to the meetings and the investigative stages to charging to Mr. Childress being interviewed at the police department, in our office being able to watch those interviews take place live at the Cedar Rapids Police Department, we were really involved with them. They did an incredible job putting this case together. It's no mystery that this case wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the homeowner, Mr. Barney, coming through and giving us that video. It really pieced things together. So I can't emphasize enough that it takes the cooperation not only of law enforcement prosecutors but citizens to come forward, be courageous, stand up strong on behalf of innocent victims and bring these people to justice. And that's what ended up happening in this case. Everybody's got a prison sentence for their involvement.
Linn County Attorney Nick Maybanks, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
And thanks for joining us on this podcast for Inside the Investigation. If you'd like to see the full documentary, go to the KCRG TV9 News app. Thanks for watching.